We're live today, recording. Please note on the screen, today's goal for class. We're going to discuss overgrazing and irrigation. This is the last bit of the chapter. Make sure you understand what the problems are and the solutions are pretty easy. And then we'll do quiz review. We have a quiz next class. And so we'll make sure you know that. The other issue is that you are on camera. There we go. All right. That's what we'll say. Erase the stuff here. You're on camera.
I took.
It's just the way it'll be winter term. Okay, so last time we were together, we talked about some soil conservation solutions. These solutions are important that you know them and you're familiar enough with them where you can demonstrate your understanding in a multiple choice quiz. The last one we left on was no-till agriculture or no-till farming. This is slide number 73. So if you're like trying to follow the notes that are posted and you're trying to annotate them or blend them with the stuff that you write down in your paper notebook, is always good to reference it. This is a great slide because it lists the benefits of no-till farming. We already kind of know these because that was our opening topic. And it's doing a lot of stuff that reduces our big problems, soil degradation and land degradation. Right? It's also helping out with soil productivity, correct? And then the thing that everybody loves is it reduces time and labor, or it can. And I think I listed some of these plus and minuses at the beginning of this unit. It's just kind of a reminder, because it's going to be on the quiz. All right? Let's talk about some new stuff. All right? So we've done all this stuff. We've played with soils. We've looked at a soil horizon. We know how soils formed. We know that its arrangement tells us a lot about how well it can take pressures and be clumped together and respond to plant growth. And we know that that's very key to growing food. We're almost at 8 billion humans on this planet, and soon to be 9 billion. And so we have to double our food production. So these are real problems.
We don't know how.
Well, we know a couple of ways how, right? We talked about some reasons. We read that article. That article discusses ways to do more with our farming.
Yeah.
And that's what we're discussing right here. The other issue is probably stop reproducing.
We need a play.
Listen, I don't know what moral compass you follow, but I don't think any of them say, let's make more suffering happen to other kids. Just saying, Santa Claus doesn't believe in that stuff. Let's focus on some factual stuff here. So right after that slide, we're on 74 here. It lists a couple facts, a little bit bigger, some statistical stuff. I'm not going to ask you a lot of these hard number things for a multiple choice quiz. It's mainly understanding the concepts. But when we look at solving problems, which we're headed for here very deeply, there's a lot of good background data for no-till farming. Let's take a look at how it's going. Look at this. It's growing relatively well in America. We still have a lot of places that are not practicing no-till. What do you think the blank white states mean?
No farming?
Or no data, right? We don't know. We don't know. Some of these places, like Nevada there, probably can't farm. I don't know.
Is Nevada all rocky?
It's pretty flat and desert-like. It's pretty remote. I think that they just don't have data, because I think they probably practice some sort of farming out there.
Oh, yeah.
You see in yellow is no-till, a percent of no-till. So 0 to 10% of those landscapes in yellow are not practicing. Whereas in red, they're almost more than half. So we've got a ways to go to kind of reinvigorate soil conservation and productivity. You with me? Okay, so one of the big issues is that a lot of the crops that we're growing on these lands are not directly for you. They're not going directly into your stomach. They're going to cattle. They're going to pigs. They're going to livestock. And so there's some issues with that. So I'm gonna skip over this and go right to this other problem, overgrazing. Okay, we know what that means. It's when they eat so much of the plants that it's hard for the plants to come back, and then there's so many of those animals that they're compacting the soil. And they're increasing soil erosion and soil compaction. They're making it worse, right? Does that make sense? And it's called a positive feedback loop. Let's take a look at how that looks. We have a little diagram of it. When we create this positive feedback loop, where the cows are constantly eating on the same patch of land, we end up reducing plant diversity and competition, and that allows for invasive species to move in and take over. So if you look at this diagram, this is a positive feedback diagram that shows that with more cattle, we get more overgrazing. With more overgrazing, we get more soil erosion. With more soil erosion, we get more invasive species. And then it feeds itself. So let's follow a couple of these lines here. We have overgrazing. We have two different results. We go to this one first, compacts the soil, damages structure. So we follow this one, then leads around and reduces grass survival, and that can remove the native grasses. So we're here, and then that could create erosion, and now we're reducing grass survival again. So we have a loop right there. We have another where you're compacting the soil and damaging the structure. We can go down, where when we compact the soil, we did this with our hands, we were doing our soil tests, looking at texture and feel. We did that together, yes, you remember? Yeah. Got a little dirt. And you can see how it clumped together, different soil types of clump. But if you continually do that with the weight of cattle, you can end up impeding the amount of nutrients that can flow through it, right? And you can decrease aeration. What does that mean?
Less circulation.
Of what?
Of like air.
Air.
H2O. Or
Gas.
Gas.
Good, aeration. Just making sure we understand. Whereas infiltration means water, liquids going through. So if we compact it, then we can't move through. And so that means those native grasses aren't going to do as well, but invasives might come in and outcompete. And we have another positive feedback loop there. More compaction, more invasives, less grass, more, then the cattle have to move and impact a new area. Does that make sense, how that cycle's working? Seen a couple nods. So when you review for your quiz, this is a good slide to look at. What slide is this? Slide number 80. Slide 80. So overgrazing, big deal, right? It's a big deal. We're having this happen in the tropics, right? They do slash and burn agriculture. They take out the valuable trees, sell those off, burn the remainder to put nutrients in the soil, because the topsoil is it thick or thin in the tropics? Thin, so they're trying to boost it. They grow their grasses, they put the cows on there. What's got right beneath the topsoil? Maybe 4 or 5 inches beneath the topsoil. It's clay. It's going to compact. And it's going to make everything worse, right? You see how that makes a big problem? And on it goes, right? So those of you who are avid carnivores, think about where your meat's coming from. So here's some of the numbers. When we degrade lands and stuff, it is costly in so many ways, right? Yes? When's the quiz? Tomorrow. Danny? You're still in a code of, right? We'll talk.
I think I can do it.
Okay, fine. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. All right, so when we create these feedback loops, we're also having an economic feedback loop, right? Because to repair this issue, it is costly. If your soils are being damaged, now you have to do something to amend it. You have to add a fertilizer. You have to get other sources of grass. You have to plant areas. You have to develop. And so you have all these issues that end up happening. Where does this soil end up eroding to often? Where does this soil end up?
Oceans or water.
Yeah, into the waterways. Over a third of the nitrogen and phosphorus that we use for agriculture ends up in our waterways and creates those hypoxic events. All right, so what do we do about this? Look at that. What do we do? What's the solution?
Eat them quickly.
Eat them quickly. If you remember from Omnivore's Dilemma, we can grow a cow in 6 months. I think that's pretty damn quick, right?
Yeah. No, it's just being facetious.
I know. And I'm just clapping you back. What are solutions to this?
Stop eating as much meat.
Well, there is a solution, and this isn't pretty. CAFO. What is a CFAO?
Concentrated.
It's a feedlot. That has been the response, right? You put all the cows in a little factory farm. What's the problem with that? You have diseases, right? 50% of the antibiotics that we use in this country are on cattle and livestock, not on you guys. So that's a problem, diseases. Okay, so we're creating other problems with good intentions, right? We'll save the land and the parks, and we'll graze in our national parks. We'll move them into these concentrated feedlots, but still people are pissed. Rio unfortunately goes to the hard matters. Maybe we have to eat less. Maybe. Remember, a third of you in this room are going to die of a heart attack.
What?
Statistically, right now, the statistic, the thing that is killing most Americans, 1 out of 3 Americans die of heart attacks.
Yeah.
Leading cause of heart attacks? Leading cause of heart attacks?
Obesity.
Clogs in your artery due to fatty diets or stress?
Stress.
I will definitely die this.
So I'm not just laying down facts. Remember, science is about information. You make those decisions. Maybe you have great genes, it's not an issue. Maybe you exercise so much, it's not an issue.
Me.
Unfortunately, that's true. Facts don't care about your genes. All right, let's talk about a different problem.
Irrigation.
Irrigation. So one of the things, like, in order to do more on the farms that we have, we've had this revolution. It's called a green revolution. And in the 50s, we started bringing about this better living through chemistry. We developed synthetic fertilizers, so they're perfected. We developed chemical pesticides and herbicides, and we figured out new technologies to boost production at farms through all sorts of machinery, including irrigation. Irrigation has been a phenomenal invention because you can have cattle in New Mexico. You can have a golf course in Albuquerque. Not really a food-related thing. So irrigation, there's a definition there. And so we're usually moving water from one location to another, right? Here's a really great fact that will come up again and again, highlighted right there. Big number right there. 70% of all the water that we use as a human nation is devoted to agriculture. It's a lot. It's a lot. But there's a good reason too, right? We need food. Food is good. We like food. But there's ways to make it better. The issue here is obviously we can water distribution is not guaranteed. And unfortunately, because of some pollution with fossil fuels and greenhouse gases, those water distributions based off of climate is shifting around. And we have climate change occurring, a disruption in the guarantees of where water is going to fall. Right? We have places where we know there's going to be high winds during certain months of the winter in California. That's happened forever. But now they're getting drier. They're not bringing much moisture from the ocean. They're evaporating. Anyways, just making things more complex. We all know what an aquifer is, right?
Yes, you know me so well.
If you're unclear about it, this is a great time to ask a question. All right, let's take a look at some irrigation types And then we'll talk about if they're good or bad. Here's two different types of irrigation practices. This is flood and furrow at the top. And basically what it is, a furrow is just a shallow canal. And you fill it with water until it is gobbled up by the plants. It's right next to the plants.
Probably lose a lot to evaporation.
Depending on the location where this is done, this could be, you can be losing a lot to evaporation, that's true. Very, labor, it doesn't have a lot of labor involved once you have it built, which is nice. But it may not be conservative with the water. Here's another one, these are center pivot circles in the Arizona desert. Probably not the most sustainable idea, but people are hungry, right? You have lots of people. Say what?
Why would that be sustainable?
Let's take that on. Why would this not be a sustainable idea for agriculture in the Arizona desert?
Because you're using more water because it's so hot, and so you're using so much water just to get it there because of evaporation, and then you have to keep watering it, and then it just keep getting hotter, so.
What are some foods that grow really well in the desert?
Cactus?
Cacti.
Yeah, so we're pushing the limits of that biome already artificially by trying to get it to grow things like alfalfa or corn or other grasses for feedlot stuff. So we're pushing it there, and then we're also pulling that water up from where? Where are we getting this water from? It's a desert.
Underground?
Underground, an aquifer. So these are large water storage areas, and we'll pull it up, put it on the ground, and then 60% of it gets evaporated. 40% makes it into the soil. So depending on how the water's distributed in this center pivot, it could be really bad for evaporation. So what are some ways that you've seen water distributed? And we've talked about this, so just do it again. What are some ways we've seen water distributed on a field?
Sprinklers.
Describe what a sprinkler is. Because there's several types, right? Be very clear.
It is a mechanism that sprinkles water all over.
Can you give me like a performance dance interpretation of that?
Dance. Performance dance.
Right here in front of the camera.
Yeah,
Listen.
well, sure, there's like the old sprinkler.
Okay, so this, I'm doing this.
Front of the camera.
So,
You just stand up.
shooting in the air out into that center pivot. Has anybody seen any other way?
Drip.
For center pivot? I'm trying to be focused on this.
faucet.
Say what? Has anybody gone out west and seen these plains, these large areas you have?
Yeah.
What have you seen?
Oh, they have that.
What's
Yeah.
that mean, Rick?
They have,
Interpretive dance. This one? No.
it's like this, it's like they wrap something around it and it like disperses like a mist of water. I'm not sure.
They'll have like, and if you play football, you'll see this kind, and Jake, you're gonna know this one, because you're only footballer. I know in the rip. We'll have an irrigation thing, a long tube, the water shoots up and you drink from it. They just direct it on the ground. And so a lot of these, they just have these scaffoldings where they're just moving these big racks, and they're rotating around and they're shooting water down. But their exposure is still to the air, so still have this evaporation issue, because this desert is pretty close to the equator. Why in circles? Great, I don't know. Probably easier, just a natural way to do it. I don't know.
That's cool.
All right, so this is conventional agriculture. Or irrigation. Here's a couple things that we can do to work on it. Some of it is about the crops, right? Sometimes we noticed this when we did that reading. We talked about putting and growing crops in areas where they're best suited for. So if we match, whoops, wrong highlight. If you match up a crop to the Arizona desert, maybe that would be a better thing to do, is grow up the things that are naturally already suited for drought-tolerant conditions, so they don't have to gobble up as much water. When I was in New Mexico and people were growing watermelons, I almost lost my mind. 'Cause what's inside a watermelon?
Water.
Lots of water. And there's not much water there to begin with.
Some watermelons take a lot of water to grow.
Yeah, man. Yeah, a lot. I mean, cotton is their example here. You know, this next one here. it requires so much water to produce that fiber in quantities that we can have fast fashion, or we're turning over clothing brands in 4 months, that it's ridiculous. And half of your clothes that you're wearing anyway aren't cotton anyway.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which is a fossil fuel, it's oil. Burn, baby, burn. All right, conventional agriculture. This is the problem. 43% is actually absorbed by the plants, typically. Because we're either distributing it wrong, meaning we're shooting the air, allowing the air, we're allowing it to sit to be evaporated, or the plant just it's not getting to the plant the right way where it can gobble it up. So our solution, as Tommy mentioned earlier, the best solution is right here. Look at this. 90% of the water, drip irrigation. Pretty good, but we know about the drawbacks of that. We've mentioned that. So here's conventional agriculture, here's drip, just an image. What was your question?
What's the drawback from drip agriculture?
What are they, Haley?
Drip irrigation?
Yeah, what was the drawback that you mentioned in class? You corrected that, obviously, because you experienced it.
About the material they use?
Yes.
So they're pretty easy to replace, but people tend to leave them in the ground once they're broken, and it's like, they're either plastic or rubber tubes, and if they leave them in the ground, then that's just contributing to plastic pollution.
Another issue.
Dang, we can't do anything, right?
Well, part of it is that we're living beyond carrying capacity, right? When we earlier in the fall, Billy, we did an ecological footprint of if everybody in the world lived like I did, 8 billion people. If 8 billion people live like Alan, how many resources would they need? Well, we would need like 4 more planets just to live like me. I don't commute to work, I walk. Right? I don't drive 40 minutes to a job every day like many Americans. Yet I'm using actually I think it's 3 planets. I'm using almost 3 planets to do all that stuff and live the lifestyle I have. We're living past our capacity. Because there's almost 8 billion of us that want steak and iPhones and Santa Claus to visit every day through Amazon Prime. We've broken recycling. I mean, what the hell? Since when can we recycle cardboard? They shut down cardboard recycling in town. Got too much of it. Supply and demand. Nobody wants to buy it.
You can't recycle cardboard?
They put a ban on it. That's messed up. And that's not the word I want to use. I need to swear on that one. I'm not cool. I don't care. But it's a problem, right? So we've got some real issues. But the thing that we've done really well as a species, and you can look everybody in the eye and know this and see it, is that we figured out every problem so far. We've done a good job with it. We figured out different ways to get past limits and issues. And we're gonna do it again. And you could be the guy. You could be the gal. You can make it happen. Drip irrigation is a great solution, even though it has a couple of drawbacks. Compared to what the other issues are, it's pretty minimal, right? Pretty minimal. So here are the other issues with watering. It's not just making sure the plant gets the water, it's making sure they get the right amount. Who here's ever had a house plant? Or has one currently? Oh yeah, we gotta talk, Steve, I keep forgetting about that. About the house plant. How many of you have killed a house plant before? Put your hands up. It's okay, there's no shame. Okay, most people kill houseplants due to what? How'd you kill your houseplant?
I forgot to water.
You forgot the water. How'd you kill yours? Same. I killed mine because I overwatered it. And ironically, that's what usually kills plants. You ever see their leaves go yellow on a houseplant? That's due to water logging. That's our issue here. So if you over irrigate some soils and plants, it ends up covering the roots in liquid so they can't exchange gases. And those roots will rot or suffocate, and you kill your plant. Unless it's evolutionarily evolved for that condition. So there's some plants that love to keep their feet wet, their roots wet all the time. Willows, cottonwoods, red maples, those plants like to have their roots moist and wet all the time. Where some can't stand it, and they die quickly. The other issue is salinization right up there. We've discussed this before. It's going to show up on the quiz.
Ding, 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 ding.
Right. Where's the salt coming from?
The ground. Right?
Yeah, groundwater, right? Because a lot of these places like Arizona, we're just looking at that circle, that pivot irrigation. They're drawing water from an underground source, an aquifer, and that water has seeped through all the layers of soil and gathered there. And as it goes through, it's dissolving nutrients. The salts get dissolved into that water and build up there. And then you pull them out and put them on the surface where the water evaporates, but the salt does not. And it doesn't migrate very far into the soil. It stays in the topsoil. And we know what salt does to plants. Carrot lab, right? A lot of you did the carrot lab. If you've been here for 4 years, you did the carrot lab in biology. You didn't do that? It's an osmosis lab. Where you have a carrot in fresh water, a carrot in salt water, what happens? You know what happens. What happens if you drink salt?
Dehydrate.
Yeah. And what happens if you dehydrate yourself?
You got it.
Just sugar.
Oh, well, you die. You, yeah. So a lot of these problems, I think the main point of this is we're getting to solutions. And this is where conservative thought comes into play with natural resources. And maybe even fiscal responsibility, if you want to apply that for economics, is that it's way cheaper to prevent a problem than to deal with it. Way cheaper. You can think of 1,000 examples, but we're going to stick with agriculture. It's so much easier to prevent salinization, waterlogging, than clean it up, than repair it. Because you've already lost your million, you've already destroyed your soils, right? It's harder to rebuild that. It takes time, and that means lost profits, right, economically. Whereas if you just figure out the right pace and do preventative stuff, you can typically do a lot better. That's why there's a lot of times when we look at solutions, we do a cost versus benefit analysis. How much does it cost up front versus the benefits that are yielded later? And do they do it in the right time period? Right? Everybody's familiar with that phrase? Yes. So we do that with these agricultural stuff. We find that preventing it is definitely better. There's the solutions. All right. Let's see. Solutions to our fertilizer issue. We discussed this in the fall, but our new students may need to hear this. Is that, with fertilizers, we end up creating a pollution problem, right? Synthetic fertilizers end up polluting waterways and depriving those waterways of oxygen. And so the solution is what? Compost, right? Organic fertilizers. So organic fertilizers means crop residues. What does that mean? Crop residue, go ahead. What is it?
The stems of like the unwanted stuff.
Yeah, this is just leaving some of the plant material on top of the soils. In the garden, we cut down all this comfrey and we just leave it there. Spread it on top. We call that green manure or crop residue. And then compost is you're creating that organic layer and you're adding that organic layer. Here's some pictures, right? So one of the things that we haven't talked about a lot is this thing called the Green Revolution. And it's not going to be on the quiz. It's pretty important though. For AP Environmental Science and AP exams, the Green Revolution is a guaranteed question. And we'll discuss it more later on. But basically it's this revolution of thought of applying machines, applying technology like synthetic fertilizers, and chemical pesticides and herbicides, along with getting the right crop variety, strain, that's drought tolerant, or even genetically modified to boost agriculture. It's been incredibly good. We've been able to boost crop yields almost 48% across the board for every person without gobbling up more cropland, which is great. Unfortunately, it uses about 80 times more energy and material. And so one of the issues was fertilizers, and so we know about our problems with fertilizers, right? You see right there on that slide here, and this is slide number 91 at this point, about the runoff into the oceans or into waterways. Do I need to review that for the guys that have come into the class? I know you're in the ocean, I'm assuming a lot. Do you feel like you understand hypoxia and how it happens? Okay, let's take it through them. Let's take it. So we have synthetic fertilizer. Remember what synthetic fertilizer is composed of? What?
Nitrogen and phosphorus.
Right, nitrogen that's fixed in a form that plants can use, right? So what happens when it erodes into the waterway? Somebody tell me what happens, the first step. It's eroded, there's a rain event, my synthetic fertilizers are eroded off, they get into the river. What happens? I know, what's the first, yeah, you're like explaining what we're talking about, but I wanna do the steps. That way Tag and Billy and others have a very clear understanding of it. What happens next? What's the first thing that happens?
Phytoplankton builds up.
You told me.
No, I did
That's
ask
great,
the
Cam.
question.
So phytoplankton build up, right? Or algae, why are they building up?
It's an increased, oxygen and
No,
And there's more nutrients.
Billy, silence. Only because I'm trying to have them explain it to you. You have a good background of it, but you shook me off earlier that you didn't really know, and then you just said, you jumped to the end of it. So, well, I want you to know the steps. So first step is synthetic fertilizer applied to the land. Then water erosion, or soil erodes into the water. The nitrogen and phosphate become food for algae and phytoplanktons, and take it away. Somebody else in the class. What's the next one? Yeah, what?
They eat it all up and then run out of oxygen.
What? Too soon?
No, they
Overstimulated.
They eat it all up, and where do they sit? Where do they live?
Top.
To the top, okay. Why is that important? Well, now let's do that next step.
Blocks
the sunlight.
It blocks the sunlight. It blocks the, we call that turbidity. You know that from ocean? Turbidity?
yeah.
Okay. So I didn't mean to come down. Well,
No, you're fine.
okay. Compound it, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so turbidity increases. So why is the oxygen deplete then, Billy? What do you remember?
Because there's not enough like recirculation in the water.
Okay, what else?
There's no
Too many
sunlight for the.
Sunlight's not making it. Sunlight is important because
Photosynthesis.
photosynthesis has a byproduct of farting out oxygen. Yeah, you're inhaling plant farts to live. Way to go.
Boom,
Love reading
roasted.
it. Huh?
Roasted.
Yeah, there. Okay, so we have the oxygen there, but why is oxygen going away? So plants stop making it, but there's oxygen in there. But
Because
the
there's
oxygen's
too many
getting,
organisms consuming the oxygen.
why, what are these organisms, why are they there?
Because the.
Because they
The
have a.
phytoplankton that ate all the nitrogen stuff reproduced faster. And now there's too many of them.
And they die, and the decomposers have now all the food that they need, and they reproduce, they gobble up all the oxygen. Okay, you got it. Okay, good. Unlimited steps. Okay, so we know this. So here's some graphics of this whole thing. Fertilizer use, just look at that. Look at that, how it's just gone up, 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 up. We've designed a lot of our major farms around monocultures. We've designed them in a way where they then need all these inputs in order to get money. And we're now in a problem, right? So the other issue with this is in this graph here. What's the other problem that we haven't talked about?
Contamination of groundwater.
Yes,
We talked about that.
we haven't talked about that. So this stuff is also leaking all the way back into our groundwater, of which you and I need to survive. What else? What's the other problem? Where else is it going?
Into the water.
Air pollution. So we have the water pollution, both types. It's also air pollution. And nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas. Alright. So, there we go. I think that's good. Let's talk about the quiz. What do you think is going to be on the quiz?
10 questions.
Yes, there'll be 10 questions.
There's multiple choice.
Yeah, it's multiple choice.
The different farming techniques?
Yes, all the different farming techniques are on there. How many farming techniques have we discussed in this class? Give them to me. What?
6.
6 of them. Name them. Let's go.
Crop rotation.
Crop.
contour
Crop
farming,
rotation.
Contour
Contour
farming.
Contour farming.
Terracing.
Terracing. Intercropping.
Shelter belts.
Shelter belts.
No-till farming.
No-till. Yeah, Tommy yelled it all off really quickly in a mumble thing, but remember we have a video audience. Say hi to Griffin, Dylan. You thought DJ would be in there, but you're not, you're here. So what makes those 6 different from each other? Right, why do we do them? What are they doing? So let's take an example one, contour farming. Why would we employ contour farming? What are we trying to conserve when we do contour farming? Can you answer me that?
We're trying to conserve the soil.
The soil. All of them are gonna be about conserving the soil, but what is it trying to prevent? Erosion, right. And by preventing erosion, what are we doing? What other problem are we addressing? Well, yes, we're stopping possibly stopping eutrophication. Of course, you can just not use synthetic fertilizers to get away from the thumb of the man. But yes. What else are we doing by doing contour farming? We're reducing soil degradation. So that means what? What's the difference between soil degradation, it's gonna be on there, and land degradation? What's the difference?
Biodiversity, well, land.
What do you mean by biodiversity?
Land degradation involves the decline of biodiversity,
Correct. And soil degradation is the decline of
productivity of land.
productivity and nutrients in the soil, and its diversity within it. So contour farming keeps those nutrients there. Keeps productivity stable, let's say. Good. How about intercropping? What is it doing that is so spectacular? Yes, it can help with pest resistance. Correct. Matting. I saw old Matty, that's good. What else? That's good. I didn't mean to embarrass you. Pest resistance is good. What else? Intercropping. What does it look like? What? Yeah, on these plants, they may be in rows, but there's several crops there. So you're increasing diversity. Right. And so you're creating pest resistance, and it always goes back to this. He's just nodding, he knows. We know this one?
Ted does.
He knows. What's it doing?
So when we're rotating, crops.
We're not really rotating crops here,
like
but
beans and
why is that important? What is it that they're doing?
it provides like natural, immunization to like pests.
Yeah, we've talked about the pest stuff. But on the soil, they're also,
Cycles food for the, wait, I don't know
Okay.
where we are right now.
I'm asking, what about intercropping makes it fantastic besides the pest resistance, which is good? What about it? You were saying something, I just couldn't hear you. Oh, I think you were right.
I think
Different
you're right.
seasons?
You do different stuff in different seasons. So you're providing these nutrients to soil. You're not taking everything from one thing, right? You're diversifying. Whenever you diversify any account, whether it's your portfolio for your stocks or it's your ecological reserves, when you make diversity, you create resiliency. And that means when there's a climate event, you're gonna survive. Maybe. You're gonna resist diseases too. Okay, what else is on the quiz? We have those 6 conservation practices. We said soil degradation, land degradation, what else? Yeah,
The structure of soil,
structure of soil, what do you mean by that?
Horizon.
horizon.
Yes, you need to know soil profile. I'm gonna give you a soil profile, I'm gonna say, what's missing? Is this the subsoil, is this wet, fill in the rest of it. So you need to know the order of that for a typical soil profile. Knowing that they're not always cake layers that are evenly done, they can be thin, whatever, but the order is always the same. Okay? You said soil structure, so we also want to know how soil forms. How do we form soils? Connecticut pot. Climate, time, yeah.
Material, organisms, pump.
Yes. And climate is the most important influencer is in climate. Weather, right? Huh? There's 3 types of weathering. Name them.
Physical, chemical, biological.
Boom! Nicely done. Right? So when we did the lab, going back to our hands-on lab, we have our profile. We have a desert, we have a prairie, we have the rainforest. I need to give these things back to you. What was the primary thing that was influencing that soil, the soil profile? The clay. How's clay formed? Water? Water forms it? Weathering, yeah. The weather, the amount of rainfall it's exposed to. Right, you understand this. Let's see, what else is on there that needs to be emphasized? Recall. Good on time. Let me let's look through the slides here. Going back to the beginning of them. Bow. Yo. Ah! I'm not gonna have anything on the Dust Bowl. I don't think that's as important. I mean, it's not for a quiz. Until, I think that's pretty much it. I like it. I like it. Do you think that there's something concept-wise that I should have on the quiz that you feel like you've learned and you're like, Alan, test me on that, please? No, nothing. No, don't test me on anything, please.
Yeah.
Loud and clear, got it.
Uh-huh.
Any questions about the quiz and how to prepare?
Alan,
Yes, sir.
are you on duty tonight?
Maybe.
If you are.
Yes, I am.
Oh.
No, I'm not. No, dude. Why? Well, you have a question.
No, not really.
Yeah, you got like half the AP class in of the schools. Half of them are boring. You can do it. All right, if you have any other questions for me, please ask. Otherwise, best of luck. Any questions?
I don't know what Gregory did.
So don't worry about the quiz. You know, get back. I'll give you a moment or a day where you can chat and we'll set you up for quiz. Yes, you can. Yeah. A big holiday. Manny, where are you with orange? Did you want to take? Let's take the quiz and see how it goes. And then eventually we gotta start talking about the fall term and how to get you a grade. But I want you to be ready, you know. I think the deadline for that, you know, I wanted to be in December, but really the deadline from the academic meeting is midterm. So that's sometime in January. So as soon as we get back from the holidays, it'd be nice to like meet at least twice and then just go.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm meeting with him today after classes, so I'll just ask him.
Yeah. Well, just from your interactions here in class and your attentiveness and your focus,
Yeah.
I think you're way better
Yeah,
than last.
I agree.
You're feeling that too. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have you back in town.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, see you later. Turn off the camera. This time. Good luck on your quiz.